And he started walking up, and he looked at me, and he looked at the kid, and he goes, "Yeah, you guys have been here long enough," and came over and signed for both of us.
What is going on, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome to another episode of the Green Bay Narrative, a show where it is my job each week to sit down with a different fan to hear their stories. As always, I'm your host, Ben. On today's episode, I am joined by my friend Joe. Joe and I met, man, it's been a long time. We met at training camp, gotten to know each other really well through the years of going to training camp together. During my conversation with Joe, we talk about his first trip to Lambeau Field. Obviously, we discuss training camp, autographs. We talk about Clinton Dix, which is kind of unfortunate being that he got traded in the trade deadline, but still, nonetheless, we threw that conversation in there. And honestly, so much more. It was a lengthy conversation because Joe is never short of words, which is great for a podcast. So I'm excited for you to hear his story. Without further ado, let's jump on in. And we are joined by the man, the myth, the legend, Joe. Joe, how you doing, man?
I'm doing great. I love that man, myth, legend thing.
I think that might be the first time I've ever used it, if I'm not mistaken.
You know, that one should have been on the Hollywood episode. Good old Kurt, you know.
Well,
I think I'm the one that's known but unknown.
You know, but I think if anyone who goes to training camp, that listens to this podcast episode, they're going to know who you are. So you're always, I don't know, you're rememberable. You got some good stories. You got always have the camera out. I'm excited to hear them and capture them on a podcast tonight rather than just hearing them at training camp.
Yeah, I look forward to giving my story here.
So the first thing I always ask anyone coming on, just for the people listening, where are you from?
I am from a small town in southeast Iowa called Eldon. It's not really anything of importance. I was actually surprised a couple of years ago when I looked it up just for the heck of it that they claimed we had 900 people. I thought the count was a lot lower. But yeah, about 900 people. We do have one claim to fame. I don't know if you're familiar with much art stuff. But we have the painter Grant Wood, the famous painting American Gothic, where it's got the farmer holding the pitchfork next to his wife.
Oh, sure.
And the house behind him. Yeah, I live like 3 blocks away from that house.
Really?
Yep.
I did not know that. That's interesting.
Yep.
Is that? Do you like people stop and take pictures there all the time?
Yes. I believe it is on the National Historical Registry. Matter of fact, I think up until recently somebody was actually living in the house. But I think about 10 or so years ago they finally put up a visitor center. So, to draw in more tourists and all that to, make it more known. And I think it's a small museum. And then they have like cutout clothes that you can put over the top of yours to make you look like, and they take the whole American Gothic picture.
That's really interesting. I had no idea about that, Joe. I had no idea that was even an American thing. I mean, I know I'm very artistic and sophisticated, so it probably surprises you, but I had no idea that was even American. So very cool.
Well, you see it everywhere. People, make parodies of it all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot of people are like that, where they didn't think it was an actual house. It was just, background and whatever. But yeah, Grant Wood actually lived in Eldon for a bit. And if I remember right, and I could be wrong, growing up here, I didn't really care about it. It was just another house. But if I remember right, it's actually his neighbor and his neighbor's sister that were the models for the picture. So it wasn't actually a husband and wife deal. It was brother and sister.
Interesting. You're teaching us all sorts of things here, Joe.
Well, that's my job, you know. I got to teach people. I got to make everybody more classy.
I'm feeling more sophisticated. I'm going to have a cup of coffee with my pinky out after this one. Well,
now that I've bored you with my history.
Yeah, we all learned something here, I think. Well, with you being from Iowa and growing up in Iowa, how the hell do you become a Packers fan in that area?
Well, do you want a long version or do you want just like the Cliff Notes?
Man, we got all the time in the world.
Well, the short version of it is my mom has family that lives up in Wisconsin. They lived in Sheboygan and the surrounding areas, so it was just basically every summer I was up in Wisconsin. You know, a lot of times during like holidays we were up in Wisconsin, so it was hard not to become a Packer fan. But the longer version was basically my mom's parents were divorced, and when my grandma remarried, my step-grandpa was over-the-road salesman, and they ended up moving into Wisconsin. I think they started out in Shawano, went to Belgium, Sheboygan Falls, and then finally ended up in Sheboygan.
Gotcha. So just a lot of time.
That's where he resides now.
Yeah.
And then my mom would kind of play the back and forth like most divorced parents or kids of divorced parents would do.
And is that the grandpa's house you stay at now when you go to training camp?
That's my step-grandpa.
Okay.
But, you know, I've known him all my life as grandpa, and
right.
He will always be grandpa.
Yeah, as someone with... I had my step-grandpa as well that I grew up as my grandpa. He was my grandpa. There's no step on that one. So I definitely get where you're coming from there.
And it was basically like... I always laugh because it's basically like a messed up version of the Brady Bunch, because when my real grandpa got remarried, my step-grandma had 2 daughters, and then they had 2 more daughters. So altogether, I have like 7 or 6 aunts and 1 uncle.
Yeah, you got a big family there, but that's not always a bad thing, right?
I think at the last count, there were 28 first cousins.
Holy shit. That is quite a big family there.
Made for interesting holidays, I tell you what.
And yeah, you're not kidding. When did you start going to training camp then? Because I feel like you've been going as long as I have been. I remember meeting you as long as I've been going, you've been going. Well,
actually, when I was a kid, I think I was 8 or 9, you know, when that stuff really starts getting into you that you want to be more active with your sports teams.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said, every summer we'd go up to Sheboygan, or I'd go stay with my grandparents for a while, and then Mom would come up and get me or whatever. And it just ended up that I think I had heard from somebody that they did this thing called training camp. Of course, I didn't know anything. I was 8, 9 years old when this stuff was going on. And that they had this big tradition up there. So I think we just kind of took a random trip up, the hour north to Green Bay, and we started. We found the practice field, and of course, you got the Hudson Center, and then you have the outside field. There was no Nitschke field at that time. And I guess for those that don't know, there's actually 3 practice fields. There's one that they do all their closed practices on. They have the indoor practice field, and then on the other side they have Nitschke field, which is open for everybody during training camp. Well, when I went up there for the very first time, there was no Nitschke field. It was just, you had the one field and then the inside for the Hudson Center. And then when they did close practices, all they did was tarped off the chain link fence. I always found that funny. But, yeah, we just kind of went up one time, and we didn't do it like I do now, where we would go, I go up and spend a week up there doing nothing but training camp. We just went up for the day to see, because that was something that we don't have it in Iowa. We don't have a pro team in Iowa. We don't have pro football, pro baseball, any of that. Mm-hmm. So, you soak up as much as you can when you're up there. And that's pretty much what we did for that one day when I was 8 or 9. And that just kind of started the tradition after that.
Interesting. So will you go get autographs, or were you just kind of there to watch practice?
Hard to believe, but when I was a kid, I was very shy and very quiet. Yeah, I know it's very hard to believe, but I didn't communicate a lot with people. It just, I don't know. I obviously I grew out of it, but yeah, I didn't. I got one autograph, I think, that first time I went up there, and that's a funny story in itself. That the way they do it now is completely different than what they did it back then. Mm-hmm. It was a free for all back then. It just, there were no guardrails, there were no dream drive, there was no nothing. It was a free for all. Players would grab bikes from kids and just ride down, and you would get mobbed both ways, both back and forth. And at the time, I'm 32, so you figure when I was 8 or 9, that's got to be 24 years ago, 23 years ago. So that was the heyday of Favre and Reggie and Butler and Freeman and all that. And it just, people would just mob these players. And of course, me being the shy, quiet guy, I wouldn't get involved with the scrum, with the big old piles, the masses. But I came across one guy that had a couple of people around him, and I got him on something that, it was like a program or something that my mom had bought that had a little section in it for autographs. And I got the one guy, and I don't even remember what his name was, but I think it was he was an offensive lineman. And we had got home. I think we left for home 2 days after that. And when we got home, I was watching ESPN. They had some kind of deal going on, and I was reading the bottom line, and the guy that I got the autograph from had got cut.
Well, hey, I mean, still, it's cool. It's a cool memory that you got an autograph one of the times you went, even if you're a little too shy. Did you eventually, after the years of doing it, kind of build up the confidence to try to get any other autographs, or were you just kind of always lurking in the background and just kind of taking things in?
Well, when I was a kid doing it, I always just kind of, I did a lot of what I do now, where I just kind of lurk in the back and take pictures. At the time, it was hard to do because, like I said, they just had the chain link fence up. There's no seats or anything, so I have a lot of pictures of players, but there's chain link in between it. So, they're not the greatest pictures in the world, but that's what I would do. I'd sit there and I'd take pictures and just kind of be in awe of the masses that were around there. Because you got to remember, I just said the town that I lived in, they claimed to have 900 people. Well, there could easily have been 1,000 people sitting there dealing with the practices and all that. So I'm way out of my element.
Sure. And when did you finally get into collecting more?
That would have been when I started coming back up as an adult.
Okay. And roughly when was that for you?
The Super Bowl year was 2010. Mm-hmm. Was that the 2010-2011 season? That was probably when I started collecting autographs.
So probably right around the same time that I really started heavily going to Lambeau Field for training camp and other opportunities. And one thing I've noticed, and it's probably even more so for you because you went back in the 90s, or you were going in the 90s even, is how much it's changed over the last 10 years, even not even 10 years, 8 years, 7 years. How much it's changed.
It's well, like I said, when I went up there, and that was part of the reason why I didn't do the autographs when I was a kid, was because it was just a huge mob.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I remember trying to go up to Antonio Freeman when I was a kid as he was walking back, and there were 3 or 4 people deep circled around him.
Wow.
And he could not walk. He would start yelling, "Hey, we got to get moving because I got to get up to the stadium," but he was just swarmed. So, and then now, and I know we've done our fair share of complaining about the Dream Drive and all that, but at least the Dream Avenue or whatever they call it has stopped a lot of that, where now they have it barricaded off so the players can move freely up and down, and they have areas where you can set up and you can, as you know, rake in a pretty decent amount of autographs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, my complaint's not so much with the Dream Drive. I just, and it doesn't even really faze me as much now that I'm getting older, but back in like 2010, 2011, it was so much more fan friendly, where players just seemed to interact more, and the access to them was a little bit easier, and not like crazy like back in the 90s, but you could actually interact with players, and players could interact with fans a little bit easier without really, like, the players really having to go out of their way to do so.
Well, and I've thought about it too, but I think a lot of the construction that was, the renovations they've done at Lambeau has hindered that more than what Dream Drive did.
Yeah.
Because now there's definitely not that huge area.
Mm-hmm.
And that's pretty much what it is. There's not that huge area where it feels more like a circle. It felt like more like a circle where you just engulfed these guys, but there was barricades and they could go in and out freely. Whereas now with the Dream Drive, it's just one long stretch of area where it feels like it's harder to deal with, but actually it's probably the same size.
Yeah, I think the new parking lot is really what did it.
Yeah, that one's hard, but I can understand why they did it, and we can touch on this later too. I've watched too many of the younger people at the old parking lot that they just had the old chain link fence, that they would purposely throw stuff over the fence. And then they would climb the fence and jump into the player parking lot to retrieve whatever they threw over there.
Yeah. By all means, the logistics of it makes sense. I just think that that's the biggest indicator for the big change and big feel of training camp being less fan-friendly. I still enjoy going. I still like going to training camp and interacting with players and seeing what's going on and getting that early season electricity that comes with it, but it just feels different compared to 5 years ago.
Right, it does, and I feel the same way. I've had my fair share of complaints about it. It just, I would rather them put in more stuff like that and still allow some player interaction instead of them staying the way they were and having the possibility of negative player interaction.
Sure. That makes sense.
When you got somebody jumping a fence to get into the player parking lot and they're just like a 12, 13-year-old kid, what's stopping the 25 to 30-year-old guy from doing the same thing? Yeah.
And you and I both know there's plenty of negative in that sense of like the people that go, by and far, the people there are great, but there's always that handful that's just ruins it for everyone. They're very rude to people. Go ahead, Joe.
Basically, they think the players owe them.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how many times I've heard that, they need to do this because they wouldn't have a following if it wasn't for us fans, which in a way is true, but that doesn't mean they owe you anything for it.
Mm-hmm.
And it just, I would rather have, well, I don't know. I don't know what I was going to say with that. It's just one of those things that I go there and I appreciate everything.
Mm-hmm.
Because there's no other team that does the same type of thing.
Yep.
They have some that try, but they don't get anywhere close to what the Packers do.
Agreed. Yeah, I mean those people that are like, oh, they owe us this or they owe us that. And it's funny because what I've found over my years of doing it is I actually like when a player doesn't sign much because it makes it that much more fun to try and get them on an autograph on an item or a picture with them or even any interaction with them. And when you actually get that player, then it's like a euphoric feeling.
Rush.
Yeah, it's just such a cool feeling, even if it's something small. And I mean, it's not even always like the big name players like the Clays or the Aarons. I mean, I remember Mike Neal was always hard to get. And I think I got him one time and I was hyped because I was like, oh, I never see him sign. There's just players that you never see sign.
Yeah, and like you said, they're not always the bigger name players. The last, I don't know, probably 3 or 4 years, my biggest try was to always get the that year's draft class.
Mm-hmm.
I at least always tried to get something, at least one thing from that year's draft class. So, some years have been easier and some years have been a lot harder. But like you said, when you actually do see that person sign, even if they don't sign for you, you still kind of feel bad that they didn't sign for you, but at least that puts it in your mind that it is possible.
Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of like lottery tickets, the way they do the lottery tickets, let's take a crossword scratch off. You sit there and you scratch all these things off, and you get 2 words, and you're like, man, I was really close to that. I better buy another one.
Yeah, that moment you're at the right spot and you move last second and see the player's autograph you're trying to get signed right where you were.
Yeah. I have a story on that one. I had went up for a game, and that's always when I found the best time to try autographing outside the player parking lot was a couple days before a game. And this was before they did the renovations and put up the new player parking lot. It was still the chain link thing. And Kevin Green was the outside linebacker coach. Well, I've always liked Kevin Green, even as a little kid when he was still playing. I remember him for Pittsburgh. I remember him Carolina. I don't quite remember him for the Rams because that was just a touch before I really was getting into things. But, I mean, I was a big Kevin Green fan because I just loved his intensity. I even remember when he did his little wrestling deal for World Championship Wrestling between him and Mongo. I remember that stuff because I still think I got a VHS around here with that match on a tape. And so I was huge Kevin Green, and I really loved it when they signed him to be a coach. So I'm standing with some friends outside the player parking lot, and of course, I got my lawn chair out there, and we're just kind of sitting around talking, and Kevin Green comes out. Well, I have a lot of respect for these guys, so the older ones, I always try to say Mr. or Coach or whatever it is, hey, Coach Green. So I yelled over, hey, Coach Green, can you stop and sign? And I couldn't understand what he said because I don't know if you've ever heard him talk. He's so intense that all I heard it was basically like a growl. And he put up his hand and he walked away. So I was like, okay, whatever. Maybe he's got to rush off. Well, then at that time, A.J. Hawk comes out. And so I went up, and A.J. would sign for anybody.
That's a fact.
A handful of people there. He would sign for anybody. So I went up and started signing, and here comes Kevin Green. And I hear Kevin Green go, I'll sign for 5 people and then I'm done. Because he always put a limit on it, which is better than nothing. Well, I'm right in the middle of getting A.J. Hawk as he says that, and 5 other people walk over to Kevin Green, and as I get done with A.J. Hawk, Kevin Green's done and walks away.
Oh, bummer.
But, yeah, but at least I knew it was possible to get him, and I kept going with it. I never did ever get him, but it was just one of those things that I kept up the hunt for it.
And that's the fun of it. And earlier you alluded that you were talking about how you're trying to get every draft class, every member of a draft class, and you said some are easier, some are harder. Who would you say has been the easiest draft class for you, and who would you say has been the hardest?
Hardest is an easy one. I believe it was 2015. That was the year they drafted Demarius Randall and Quentin Rollins. That was the hardest because those top 2 guys I hardly ever saw sign anything.
Mm-hmm.
I think I got everybody else in that draft class twice over, and I finally had to break down. And one of the sports card shops that does a lot of autograph signings and stuff had a sale on a couple of the photos. So I finally broke down and paid, I think, $10 a piece for the 2 of them. And that's how I finished off the draft class. But I never got either one of them.
I think I got Quentin one time, but I never got Demarius.
I saw somebody get Demarius. One of my good friends, Cameron. I'm sure you know Cameron.
Oh, yeah, I love Cameron.
He was standing there. It was so funny because I had a bunch of pictures printed off because I had pretty good success with the draft pick in prior years. So I had a bunch of pictures of Quentin Rollins and Demarius Randall, and I can't remember who that whole draft class was now, but I had pretty good pictures of a pretty good number of pictures, so I gave Cameron one, and friggin' Demarius signed for him and only him, but it was so hilarious because Demarius looked at him and goes, "That's not even me." And I was like, oh man, I have 3 or 4 of the same picture, and it's not even him. But he still stopped and he signed the photo, and he goes, "I'll sign it anyway," and signed it. And Cameron was the only one he signed for, and then he went into practice, and that was the only time I ever saw him sign anything. Quentin, I never, and all the times, and of course he's not on the team at this current date, but prior to that, since being drafted, I had never seen him pick up a pen to sign anything.
I got him one time.
I mean, I'm not. Yeah, I was going to say I'm not saying he never did, but in front of me, I had never seen him.
And he had a beautiful signature, probably one of my favorite signatures I've ever seen.
The one that I finally bought from that shop up there, it was a picture of him, and I think it was it his rookie year we played Oakland at Oakland, and that was the year Jordy got hurt, I believe.
Yep. So
we were down a bunch of receivers, and that game was a mess anyway. And it's a picture of him making his interception. I think it was over Cooper.
Wasn't it a pick 6 on that one? I know Randall had a pick 6 in that game. Maybe his was against the Rams.
It was a pick 6. I think it was in the end zone. I'd have to look at the picture again. But I'm pretty sure it was a pick in the end zone over Cooper. And it's signed in gold, and it's such a beautiful signature that it makes me, it just drives me crazy that I can never get him signed. Because I had some amazing pictures that I really wish he would have signed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think he had his pick 6 against the Rams, and I think Demarius had his against the Raiders.
Well, I think Demarius had a few that year. He had like 2 or 3.
Yeah, he had a good rookie season. Both of them had a good rookie season, and then it just seemed to go downhill from there.
Well, Quentin had a lot of problems with injuries. Mm-hmm. I do remember that.
Mm-hmm.
Demarius had a lot of problems, but I don't think it was just injuries.
Yeah, there's definitely something that happened more behind the scenes there that I think a lot of us fans don't know. For them to trade him away like they did. I know they're high on Kaiser and having that backup, but for them to trade him away the way they did when you're already short on cornerbacks, because that was before the draft, if I remember correctly. So you traded away essentially your number one corner for a second string quarterback, or a quarterback would use as a second string, which didn't make a whole lot of sense at the time. There has to be, in my opinion, something more behind the scenes.
I think, and this is strictly my opinion, so I'm going to put that waiver out there, that this following sentence or paragraph or whatever is strictly my opinion. I think a lot of it had to do with them trying to switch him back from safety to corner.
Mm-hmm.
Because I love the draft. I've done a lot of draft stuff, and that's something we can talk about later, too. I'm huge into the draft. I remember when he started out as a JUCO player, which is a junior college player, and he was a corner. Well, then he transferred to Arizona State, and he still played a little bit of slot, but he played mainly as safety. So it wasn't that when the Packers drafted him, he had no experience as a corner. He just had played strictly as a safety. And I think a lot of it had to do with that, because if I know you're a big Twitter guy too, and I don't know if you followed Demarius or not, but he had, after the trade, he had said something because somebody had ripped him about being a locker room cancer, and he said something to the effect that, you take a athletically gifted safety and put him as corner, and you expect, miraculous results. And that just kind of made me think that he really resented the fact that they were trying to turn him back to a corner.
Sure. I mean, that makes sense. He's flourishing right now in Cleveland as a safety.
Yeah, but it's not hard to flourish with Cleveland with the teams that they've been putting out on the last few years.
But I mean, we could use that safety help right now. Which
I really wish Josh Jones. I don't know what it is that they're keeping Josh Jones back for, but he has a lot of talent. Don't get me wrong, he's going to make some boneheaded moves, but he's got a lot of talent to just regulate him to mainly special teams in that.
Yeah, I'm thinking.
But what do I know?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we're just right now we're just armchair GMing it. I think you're gonna see him kind of flourish a little bit more. Maybe he'll start getting more reps. Maybe there's something going on where Pettin's not really happy with what he's doing in his scheme, or maybe it's taking him a little bit longer to figure it out. There's definitely reasons for it, and I know fans get frustrated. And right now, fans are super frustrated at HaHa, which doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me, because I know he's up and down a little bit, but man, people act like he's the worst thing that's ever stepped on Lambeau Field. Just the amount of hate that guy gets right now.
I was more frustrated with HaHa last year than I am this year.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the whole team kind of went downhill last year after Rodgers got hurt.
I'd agree.
But I remember a few plays, because no matter whether the Packers go 0-16 or 16-0, I'm going to watch them and support them.
Mm-hmm.
So I watched every game last year that I could. Being in Iowa, we don't get every game. So, some illegal streaming stuff has to happen once in a while. And I think it was it the Pittsburgh game? There was a play that it resulted in a touchdown, and Roethlisberger put the ball right on the numbers, and it was a great play. But if HaHa would have even just put forth half an effort, I think it could have been an interception. And again, like I said, I'm not an expert. This is strictly my opinion, but it looked like even before the catch was made, he'd given up on it. And and like I said, it wasn't just him last year. It was, the pretty much most of the team had seemed to check out. We don't want to talk about the former number 80. But yeah, it seemed like everybody had checked out last year, and when you go from that where you're really looking bad to this year, a lot of people don't have short-term memories; they have long-term memory, and they don't care about what you're doing now. It's what you did last year.
Yep. Well, and I think people are also frustrated because that I don't know whether it's a clickbait article or not, but they interviewed him about next year, and he's like, "Well, I'm just kind of playing for now. You don't know what's next year. I might not be here next year." And people took it in the way of, well, he doesn't want to be here. And I think the way he sees it is he's seen players like Casey Hayward and Micah Hyde leave. So what makes him think that his job's secure?
Well, and really, it being a contract year, you have to think like that.
Yeah, and I don't think that's him wanting to leave by any means.
No, because you got to play up because you're basically auditioning for a job next year.
Yep.
Whether it's with the Packers or one of the other 31 teams in the league.
Mm-hmm.
So you're auditioning for a job no matter what. So you have to play like you're not going to be there next year.
Yep. And I think as Packer fans, we feel like these players grow more of a connection to the team when in all actuality they don't. I mean, they owe us nothing.
And they don't owe the teams anything.
Yeah.
They owe them a little bit because, they took them in with a draft pick, but really what's a draft pick?
Mm-hmm.
You see so many of them traded every year, and there's no names attached to them or anything. It's just round 1, pick 22 goes to this team for round 2, pick number 3, and round 3, pick number 4.
Yep.
I mean, they're not entities. They're just paper.
Mm-hmm.
And they don't owe you anything. They don't owe the teams anything like that. They don't owe them for the contracts. The teams give these contracts because the player earned it by playing the way he did.
Exactly. So I don't know. I personally hope he's back next year. I don't think safety's a huge demand in the free agency market. At least it never seems to be. So I think you could get him back for a pretty modest deal. And I personally hope that he's back. And maybe with Josh Jones beside him or another safety.
Yeah, I mean, this year really showed that safety was not a huge commodity in the free agent world. But, not to get political with anything, I think that there were some other things working against some of these players. Yeah,
I agree with Eric Reed, but I mean, even Kenny Vaccaro was out there for a while. It took him forever to get signed.
Vaccaro was another one that was pulling a little bit of that. And like I said, these teams have been staying far away from it.
Gotcha. Yeah. I mean, you very well could be right.
Let's go on a different tangent.
Yeah, that's a different tangent for a different type of podcast.
Yeah, let's get back to more of the fun stuff.
I'm going to be honest with you people. I have no idea which Packers facts I've used and which ones I haven't. I really should have wrote these down from the start, but I didn't. So if anyone out there has a list of all of them, please send that my way so I know where I'm at. Otherwise, we might hear a duplicate here or there. I apologize in advance. This week's fun Packers fact is about the first NFL game the Packers played in. So in 1921, they played the Minneapolis Marines on October 23rd. They ended up winning the game 7-6, so quite a barn burner in score there. Their first loss came a week later against the Rock Island Independence. So pretty interesting to go back that far and hear the team names that were around then that are obviously no longer around. So thought that was worth sharing. Let's get back to the episode with Joe. So with you at training camp, one thing you talked about is you're always taking photographs. When did you start taking photographs? So when did that become a passion of yours to capture these moments? Because before our episode, I'm looking through your Twitter and man, you capture some really cool ones. I'm sure Adam appreciates the one you catch of Evelyn or the ones with Sawyer. You just capture some
Sawyer's
great
my own little
moments.
personal model.
That's because that kid's too good looking, and he knows it. He's just like, he's a ladies' man.
Well, and think about all the players he's riding with too.
Yeah,
I mean, it just, and then Adam's got both kids' bikes set up so wonderfully that it's hard not to take pictures of them. But
you capture, but some of the other moments you capture, man, like they're just, I see you taking them at camp, but I don't live on Twitter sometimes, or I miss things on Twitter, so I don't see them posted. And I was just looking through them, and I was like, man, that's a cool thing that you captured there of like Jair taking a selfie with fans, or a player signing for a kid and just seeing the kid's face light up. And you just capture moments really well. I'm just curious, like, when did that start for you? When did you decide that you're going to start capturing
I want to stop with the compliments. My head's big enough. I don't need any more of an ego boost. But I appreciate it. Basically, like I said, day one, when I was a kid, I would take pictures of players and all that. Then when I started to come back up to training camp more, I do, man, you've got to just, you think my autograph collection is huge? You got to see the picture collection I have. I have SD chip on top of SD chip on top of SD chip that are just filled with pictures that I've never shown anybody, that's never been posted. I just sit there basically with my finger on the shutter button, and I think, and my grandpa would always laugh at me when I'd get back to his house after training camp. Well, how many pictures today did you take? And I'd sit there and I'd go through them, and the counter would read like 400, 500.
Wow.
And that was just for that day's practice.
That's insane.
And yeah, it's insane. It really is. And it makes for a crick in the neck when you've got that camera strap over it and, everything else. But when I started getting back into it, I did take more practice pictures, but then the tradition of the bike riding really got to me, because what I would do is and you know this a little bit because, we've known each other for a long time now. I always try to print out the pictures of these guys because they're more apt to sign them than a stock photo.
Mm-hmm.
They've seen the stock photos hundreds of times. But what I mean by a stock photo is like the professional cameramen that are taking pictures during games, of the big plays and the whatever's going on. And they've seen them hundreds of times, and usually when they see those, they get in mind that it's a 50-50 shot that those people are sellers.
Mm-hmm.
People who are selling the autographs. Excuse me. So I always try to print out the pictures I've taken because it's not something they've seen before.
Right.
And they're more apt to see that. And so that got me going into taking more of the bike riding pictures, because I started getting players requesting copies of pictures. And so then I started doing the bike riding because, like you said, you got the kid. And I've been contacted on Twitter by several people who I had no idea who the kid in the picture was, but they loved the picture enough, and it was their kid or their nephew or their cousin or whatever, and they've asked if they could, get a copy of it, or, like you said, I have a lot of them of Sawyer with Blake Martinez or Brett Hundley. I think I even got a couple of when he was with HaHa, and I would always make those trades, not really trades, but I would always make a couple of them up and, give them to Adam and them so they could have them. But you get, I always have people contact me for those, and so that's what I take pictures more of. I could give a rat's butt about practice anymore. The bike riding tradition is what my camera captures.
Interesting. And you, like I said before, I don't want you to get a big head, but you take some good ones. And
I might not get out of the house.
They're really enjoyable to look through, because it just seems like each year has a different energy with it, and you do a good job of capturing that energy or that different feeling that every year brings to practice. And even Kevin, I don't know if you met Kevin at camp this year. I'm sure you did.
I probably did, but I'm not exactly great with names. That's why you always hear me say bud or chief or boss or something like that, because unless I've seen you over and over and talked to you over and over again, I hope whoever's listening to this does not feel bad about it. It's just I have a crappy memory and I don't remember names. I forget my name half the time.
He was with Kurt a lot. He's from California as well.
Yeah, the other California guy.
Yep.
Yes, I met Kevin last year.
Gotcha. Yeah, so he takes some photos too, and it's just cool to see those moments and relive those moments, especially if you've been there and done it and you were part of that moment. Because I know you and I have talked. Go ahead, Joe.
Oh, I was just going to say, I wish I was more active on Twitter to start doing like what they call it, the TBTs, the Throwback Thursdays, and all that. That it would give me a chance to sit down and start throwing those back out there. But like I said, I don't have the best memory, and I'm not the best at social media. I do have to give you and Dakota and Travis credit, because when I first met you guys, you asked me if I had Twitter, and I said, yeah. And I said, but I don't use it, and I think I have like 3 followers, and all 3 of them are robots. And from that day forward, you guys kept in touch with me on there, and I've ballooned up to like 1,040 followers. So I give you guys credit for getting me back on the social media, even though I still don't use it that much. I pick on people. That's the type of person I am. I don't get mean with it, but I will razz people here and there on it, and that's about as far as I go.
Would be concerned if you didn't, Joe.
I hear that a lot too. I don't know if that's a good or a bad thing.
But it's funny because training camp it's like a family reunion every year. You keep in touch on Twitter, but then every year you just hang out and you're like, oh, it's old friends all over again.
Yeah, and our group seems to get bigger and bigger every year.
That's the beautiful part of it.
Somebody that Kurt has talked to on Twitter, or girlfriends and boyfriends start joining the group, or there's new additions by new babies or whatever. The group just seems to grow and grow every year.
Or we meet new people and they just kind of join in on the festivities. It's nice.
Yeah, we're like sponges. We'll suck up everything.
So I do want to kind of touch base on some other things before I kind of get away from the training camps scene. What would you say is your favorite and least favorite part of training camp?
That's a good question. My favorite is just all of it. The time that I spend up there, I save training camp as basically my only vacation for the year. I might take a day off here or there at work or whatever, but my 1 or 2 week vacation is usually spent in Green Bay, Wisconsin. And the reason that is because I can go up, I can be carefree, I can be around friends, people that I enjoy being around, I can be around the team that I enjoy being around, and I can do a hobby that I enjoy. I'm not a drinker, I'm not a smoker, I don't do anything like that. So my addiction is my pictures, my autographs, and my team. Sure. My least favorite, it's hard to pick, but it would probably be some of the people that you have to deal with up there. Because like you said earlier, not everybody is rainbows and, sunshine and rainbows or gumdrops and lollipops. And I think a lot of early mornings cause a lot of bad attitudes. And what I mean by that is when practice starts at 8 o'clock and you have to be up, if you want a prime spot, as we like to call them, in the autographing territory, you have to be up at practice 2 hours before practice starts.
Mm-hmm.
So if you figure 8 o'clock is practice, you have to at least be there by 6 o'clock. And when I was staying at my grandpa's, it was an hour away, so I would have to be up at 3 o'clock just to get up there by 6 o'clock.
Mm-hmm.
So, and you get a lot of people that don't, they're new to the situation, so they don't understand a lot of it, and they try to, how do I want to put this? I've had a couple interactions where, you know how it is when you set your chair up and you just kind of sit there, and you've had people try pushing their way in.
Yep.
And you have to sit there and say, no, I have no problems helping you. I have no problems doing stuff with you. But you got to ask me. You can't just, because even though this isn't my property per se, I've been here since 6 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah. Yeah, you got people that barge in getting their last second thinking that they should be able to for no reason at all. And it's never little kids either, which is the funny thing. You'd think it'd be the little kids that were trying to sneak in. It's always like parents that are pushing people in or
trying to push their kid into it.
Yep.
The kid's not interested in doing it, but the parent wants that stuff, so they push the kid into it.
Yep.
And I've seen that a lot too. Now, you know me just as well as most people do. If there's a kid, I always try helping them.
Yep. Exactly.
I always try to help everybody, but I kind of do it for selfish reasons, because a player is more apt to sign for a kid. So, I don't look 12 years old. By no means do I look 12 years old. So if I've got a little kid beside me, I'm more apt to get just as many signatures for myself as I am for that little kid.
Yep.
So I always try having that little kid around.
Exactly. That's a smart strategy there. Out of all the players you've ever gotten, who would you say is your favorite? Like, what was your favorite experience you've ever had for it?
Okay. Let me break this down. Are we talking at training camp, or are we talking just period?
We can go period.
Okay, my favorite is Julius Peppers, and I have an amazing story about Julius Peppers' autograph. I went up in 2015 for the San Diego Chargers game. Do you remember the San Diego Chargers game? That was the game that it came down to Demarius Randall
deflection
pass breakup.
Yep.
Yeah, and it went down to the last second. And okay, so like I said, whenever I go up for a game, I always try to go up a couple days before and stay like a day after. So it was in mid to late October, so it wasn't really cold. It was pretty decent. So I went up and stood outside the player parking lot, which is my normal. I might as well set up house there. It's just my normal area. And really, there was only one other guy there. We had some guys show up that kept coming back and forth, but it was just me and one other kid. And I got there probably about 8 o'clock, so most of the players had already been in, but I at least wanted to set up camp. That way I could be ready for anything. And, I don't know, about 8:30 in rolls Peppers and what was it he drove? Was it a Maserati? And I was like, man, I looked at the kid and I go, and bear in mind, I talked to anybody. I didn't know this kid from Adam. And so we just kind of sat up there and we're talking with each other and, who are you getting all that? I go, so when Peppers' Maserati pulled up, I was like, man, that's Julius Peppers. He goes, yeah. So I had a couple pictures of Julius Peppers that I had been trying to get through training camp that I didn't get done. And he got out of the car and started walking towards the player's entrance. And let me take a step back. I said this before, but I'm 32, and I have a real big problem with calling anybody younger than me Mister. So you don't ever hear me yell at players, hey, Mister, whatever. But if the player is older than I am, or the coach is older than I am, I have no problem showing them the respect of saying Mister. So when Julius Peppers was heading towards the door, I said, "Hey, Mr. Peppers, do you have time to sign?" And he looked at us and he said, "No, I'm running late as it is, but if you're here later, I'll get you later." And you know just as well as I do, that is the biggest brush off in the world.
Yeah, you hear that every day.
Yeah, they're banking on you not being there later. Well, I looked at the kid and I go, "I'm going to be here later because I have nothing else to do today." And so we got a few of them that day. And about noon is when they start kind of leaving for their lunch break, or at least a lot of the veterans do. Most of the younger players stay there and eat at the facility. But a lot of the veterans will go out for their lunch break. And he must have snuck out one of the last couple doors they have at the player parking lot, because, I don't know, about half past noon, I saw a tall guy walking in, and he had a hood up, so I couldn't really see a face. But being as tall as he is, I think Peppers is 6'7"?
Something like that, yeah.
And it's hard to miss a 6'7" guy. I mean, I'm 6'2" myself, but it's still hard to miss a 6'7" guy. And he started walking up, and of course he dropped the hood down because of it was getting hot out. And I said, "All right, here we go." I go, "Mr. Peppers, do you have time to sign now?" And he looked at me, and he looked at the kid, and he goes, "Yeah, you guys have been here long enough," and came over and signed for both of us.
That's awesome. So
that one is probably my best one that I've gotten in person.
That's a good story to have, though, because like we talked about earlier, I mean, if he signed all the time, that autograph wouldn't mean anything to you.
Nope. Well, it would, because I still love getting them.
Right. I shouldn't say it like that, but I mean, like we talked about earlier with AJ Hawk. AJ Hawk signed for anyone and everyone. So getting his autograph wasn't as big of a deal, but getting a player like Julius, who you never see, I mean, it's awesome. It just makes it all the worth it.
Yeah, it does. And Julius was another one of those that was kind of like AJ, that if there was a small group of maybe a handful of people, he would stop and sign. But if the group was any bigger than that, he really wouldn't. Yeah,
he was a tougher one to get.
Yeah, because after that point, anytime I was out at the player parking lot, because I went to a game the next 2 years, no, the year after that, and then the training camp and the game I went to the next year, I got them both times. So, I mean, it was just one of those things that if it's a small group, he would stop and sign for us. But if it was a large group, then yeah, that's one of those things that, that Kurt told me one time, good old Hollywood told me one time, that Mike Daniels told him that if he signed one, he would have to sign 100. Because if he signed 99 and then signed that last 100th one, then he was an asshole.
Mm-hmm.
And, if you sit there and think about it, it's the truth. Because how many times have you sat there at training camp and you got stuff signed and a player has signed up the railing, but then like right at you, you're the last one he signed, and then the guy next to you is just complaining about it.
Yep, exactly.
So I understand if it's a small group that a lot of these guys will sign a lot, but if it's a big group, they won't.
And that's just part of it. That's part of the game. Speaking of games, when did you start going to games? When was your first game you attended?
Okay, my first game was in a dreaded year.
Okay.
It was 1999, and that was the year that Ray Rhodes was coach. The lone year Ray Rhodes was coach.
Who was the first game? What was the first game?
That was it. It was a Detroit Lions game, and I think it wasn't a Thanksgiving game, a day game, but it was the weekend of Thanksgiving.
Gotcha.
And it was 1999. Like I said, it was the Ray Rhodes era, as short as that was. And it was against Detroit. I do remember that the Packers won. I don't remember the score, but my step-grandpa, or grandpa, was the place that he was worked. He was on the board of directors, and one of the guys he was on the board with was a good friend, and the guy had season tickets, had them forever. And he would go to the games that he would want, and then he would offer up the other games to whoever wanted to buy them. So once every year, my grandpa would buy the two tickets, and then he would give them to a different grandkid. And that year was the year that me and my mom got to go.
Nice.
And man, it was it was one of those things that was bittersweet. Because when you think about going to a Packer game, what do you imagine? You imagine sitting out in the crowd in the wide open air, freezing your butt off and enjoying it. Now, that's not to say I didn't have fun, but the seats we got were box seats.
Mm.
And you talk about high-class stuff, because if I remember right, I think even the face value on the tickets were, and this was 1999, was like $190 or something like that.
Sounds about right.
And it was great. I didn't freeze. So, I mean, it was a great experience, but it wasn't, I always told my mom after that point that it wasn't the Lambeau experience.
Mm-hmm.
We had a great game. The Packers won. The people all around us treated us well. The staff treated us well because they have their own staff inside the box seat area. I guess they're club seats now, but at the time they were box seats. They didn't have them closed off. They were just all one giant row of seats, kind of like a movie theater.
Interesting.
And it was great. I always told her that if we win again, I always wanted to do the Lambeau experience. Middle of December, -10 degrees out, snow falling down, and all that. But yeah, 1999 was the first year I'd went up for a game.
So have you basically went to a game a year since, or at least a game a year?
No, I've only ever been to 4 games in my life.
Okay, just because you're like, oh, anytime I go for a game, and it sounded like you had a lot of other stories where you had a lot of other games. So out of all the games you've been to then, which game would you say is your favorite one you've ever attended?
I was at the Atlanta Falcons game in 2014. And the scoreboard doesn't reflect it, but that was probably my favorite game.
Because that was the one where we blew them away at first, and then Julio almost made it a one-man comeback?
Yeah, he almost put up 1,000 yards just in that one half.
That's what it felt like.
Yeah, that was the game, and that was my Lambeau experience. That was the first game I had come back to. So I had a big break from 1999 to 2014.
Wow.
But that was my Lambeau experience because it was a Monday night game, and it was, or was it a Sunday night? It was a night game. I think it was Monday night. Yeah, it was Monday night. And the whole way up it was snowing. And I was like, all right, wonderful. And the temperature was dropping, and I think it finally hit 20 degrees, and then wind chill factor knocked it down to like 0. But it was one of those snows that it wasn't a dry snow. It was a real wet one, so every time it hit your clothes, it melted, and you got a giant wet spot. And and the whole hour before the game, sitting in the stands, I just got soaked. And but then the snow stopped, and then it just got cold. And what made it so memorable, even though we should have handily won it because we, like you said, we had it won at halftime. But what made it so memorable was I had two guys sitting next to me. The one guy was a Packers fan, and he brought his friend with him, and his friend was wearing a Detroit Lions hat. And I looked at him when he sat down. I go, man, you made a wrong turn at Albuquerque. And he just, yeah, I know. And after, he was a great guy, and we sat there and talked for a bit about it. And, he had never been to a professional game before. And, when you live near a place, it's easier to go to one place for a professional game than it is to try traveling somewhere else.
Mm-hmm.
So I think they were from the UP, and so it was easier for them, I think, to come to Lambeau than it would have been for him to go to Detroit.
Yep.
And so, they ended up getting the 2 tickets, or his friend was able to get the 2 tickets, so he decided to come with him. And he goes, well, I do have a vested interest in this game because Jordy Nelson's on my fantasy football team. So, yeah, that was probably my best game.
That's a good game, though. It kind of fits. It fits what you're looking for: the snow, the ice, the outdoors.
And I was worried that I had hypothermia because you get to that point where your legs start shaking.
Yep.
But I loved it. I got back to my grandpa's and unthawed, and if you would ask him, I had a big grin on my face, and I think I had that grin for like the next 2 weeks because it was just amazing. Because it was what I envisioned Lambeau to be.
Mm-hmm. And those are the fun games if you can get there. I know one of my favorite games I ever attended was the Packers-Giants game, the playoffs game in 2016 with the Hail Mary. And that was a cold game, cold Lambeau Field. There's ice in the bleachers. It wasn't snowing, I don't think, but still just a cool... it just feels like a different experience than going in early September or October even.
And I'm not going to pass up any chance to go to a game as long as I can fit it into my schedule. But I had, other than this year, I probably won't get to go. I have been able to go pretty steady from 2014 to now. No, I guess I missed another year because I was in the middle of a job change. But I had been. I went to the Falcons game in 2014. 2015, I went to the Chargers game, and then, like I said, I was in the middle of a job change, so I missed 2016, and then I got to go to a game last year.
Well, I'm sorry you had to go to a game last year.
Oh, tell me about it, man. I bought the ticket in September.
Oh.
No, in August.
What game did you go to?
And I was getting ready to say that because it was the one that was the worst one to have to go to. It was the one right after he had broken the collarbone.
Oh, man.
It was the Saints game.
But still you gotta go and support your team, right? It just thinks that you had to pay premium pricing to. Yeah,
I paid $260 for the ticket.
Wow.
Yeah, but I had great seats. I was in the end zone. Don't ask me north, south, east, west, because I always get lost in Lambeau. But it was I was right on the end zone where the players come out of the tunnel.
Okay. I think that's south, but I'm like you. I always get them mixed up, but I think it's the south end zone.
And I was only like 10 rows up.
Nice.
So I saw, and I have great pictures from that game, but I didn't post any of them because that game was horrible.
Yeah, but you gotta have those games too. You gotta have those games too.
Yeah, but it was also memorable because that was the Ice Bowl reunion.
Oh, really?
Yeah, that was the 50-year Ice Bowl reunion where it was the last time they're saying Bart Starr will ever be in Lambeau.
Well, that's worth the price of admission right there.
Oh, I was crying like a baby. But they had brought a lot of the Ice Bowl guys back. Of course, Jerry was there and Dave Robinson, Dowler, Jim Taylor, I think, had even made it back. Wow. Rest in peace, Jim Taylor.
Right.
Wow. That was just decent. But they had a bunch of them up there. I didn't know it was the Ice Bowl reunion until, or was it? It was either Ice Bowl or it was the first Super Bowl reunion. I don't remember, but it was the 50-year anniversary of it.
Interesting.
Now that I'm thinking about it, I'm in all kinds of doubts. But I know it was one of those 2 years. But I didn't know it was the anniversary of it until I had got up here. And they had a ceremony, like a dinner or something, the night before, where all those players were at. And if I would have known about that, I would have got tickets for that too.
During this break, I wanted to first off say thank you so much for listening to the podcast. I greatly appreciate your support. Also, if you haven't done so already, if you could please subscribe to the podcast, The Green Bay Narrative, on iTunes, or follow us, The Green Bay Narrative, once again, on SoundCloud. I greatly appreciate all the love and support you all have given me. Leave a 5-star review while you're over at iTunes too. That would mean the world to me. I know it sounds simple, but really it goes a long way in helping the podcast be discovered by outsiders who haven't heard of it before. So thank you all so much. Let's get back to the conversation with Joe. Well, you said you've been going to training camp as more of a autograph collector, photographer now since about 2010, 2011, somewhere in there.
Yeah.
And you've been building your collection since and doing all these things. Out of your entire collection, what would you say is your favorite item you own?
Oh, are we talking strictly Packer autographs? Because I have a whole other hobby that we can get into later if you want, where I do through the mail autographs.
Yeah, why don't you tell that through the mail story real quick, if it's the one I'm thinking of, because that's a pretty interesting thing.
Well, I do, and this is another recent thing that I've started, where I think it was around the same time that I started going back to Green Bay for my autographs, where I do through the mail autographs. And what through the mail is basically what the title states. You send in my case, I do 8x10. So I send that with a letter, saying, hey, I'm a big fan. And just, basically kiss their butt. And then I send the item and, return, a self-addressed stamped envelope. And I've gotten pretty good returns on that. And I've done that, I want to say about 2010, 2011 is when I started doing that. Devon House was the first one I ever got back. And that was before he started doing his little house thing for the H.
Right.
And he was the first one that I had ever got back through the mail. But that's something that I do, and I have a whole nother collection of the 8x10s from lots of different players and lots of different teams. And not even just players and teams, baseball players, football players, actors, and
where do you even find the addresses for some of them?
I am a member of a website that is specifically for autograph and memorabilia collecting.
Interesting.
And I can plug them if you want me to, but it doesn't bother me one way or the other.
I mean, it's up to you. If it's some secret Illuminati society, then maybe I don't want it. But
well, of course, how do you think I, do what I do? You got to know the secret handshake before you can get through this door.
I'm screwed.
No, it's www.sportscardforum.com. And they have a sub-forum dedicated specifically for autograph collecting.
Interesting.
And I've met some good people off there where I'm kind of an eclectic when it comes to my sports teams. I'm only a big baseball and football fan. I'm a Packer fan for football, but I'm also an Atlanta Braves fan for baseball. And obviously, unless I hit the lottery, I'm probably not going to make it down to Atlanta for anything. And I've talked to a couple guys off that website that we've made deals where they call it 50-50, where you send them 2 items, they get to keep one, and then they'll get that signed, and then they'll get the other one signed and send it back to you.
Gotcha. Interesting.
And I've done that a few. But the through the mail stuff, they have their own inventory on there where you can actually keep track of the addresses and players and, whether they were successes or failures.
Interesting. So who's your favorite that you've gotten back from the through the mail?
Well, I'll give you a sports one, and then I'll give you a couple of non-sports ones. I'll be nice and do that for you.
All right.
My favorite sports ones, I actually got Paul Hornung back through the mail.
Wow.
Yeah, and if anybody knows, he is not hard to get as long as you're willing to pay the money. But I was able to get one signed of him where he's standing there holding his Heisman Trophy. I got that signed for nothing, just the cost of my postage.
Who was it that signed something telling you that you needed to pay?
Herb Adderley. Yeah, good old Herb. I sent. Well, actually, I had seen a lot of people getting returns back from Herb, and they always included a donation, quote unquote donation. So I was like, okay, so I'm very, and a lot of people know this about me, I'm very cheap. I don't just hand out money freely.
Mm-hmm.
And with the mailing system being not as reliable as you would hope, I wasn't going to put even a $5 bill into an envelope and send it and it not even show up. So I cut a check, got the old checkbook out. Not a lot of people know how to write those things anymore. And I put a $20 check into the envelope and sent one picture and sent the letter. And the first time I sent it, I must have sent it to the wrong address because I got a return to sender on it. So I packaged it all up and sent it to the other address that the website had listed for him. And like a week later, I got it back. He had, instead of return to sending it, he had used my self-addressed stamped envelope, put the picture, the check, and the letter back in the envelope after he put his little note, sealed the envelope, and sent it back to me. And so I had to, instead of being able to use that self-addressed stamped envelope again, I had to open it and thinking, yeah, I got it back. Wonderful. He signed it. But I had kept track on my bank, and nothing had been taken out of my bank. So I get it back, and I see the check, I see the photo unsigned, and I get the letter out, and at the bottom it says $20 cash only. Or no, it was $25 cash only, Herb.
It's classic.
That's not the worst one I've heard. That's not the worst one I've heard about Herb.
What else have you heard?
On this website, I saw a guy send something to him. Because like I said, you keep track of your successes and your failures on it. And this guy was a Cowboys fan. And I don't know if you know Herb's thoughts about the Cowboys. He didn't want to sign with them. he reluctantly played for the Cowboys. Even to this day, he does not consider him a Cowboy. He considers himself a Packer. And so this guy was a Cowboys fan and sent him a Cowboys mini helmet. And sent, I don't remember what he said he sent. I think he sent like $25, $30 or something donation. And he got it back unsigned with his cash. And on it, on his letter, it said, "I will not sign Cowboy stuff, but $100 would ease my mind a little bit more."
That's classic.
Yeah. And then I have a friend that sent to him one time, too, that basically got a letter back ripping him for something. I don't remember what it was, but yeah. It's not, mine wasn't the worst one I've heard about Herb.
That's funny. Good for him.
Yeah. Well, and like I was laughing, I go, I understand, they call it a quote-unquote donation, but the money's basically just going in his pocket. For most guys.
Yep.
There is one guy that I know that signs through the mail, and the money does not go in his pocket. It goes to his charity that he runs. The guy is an old-time baseball player. His name's Carl Erskine. He played for the old Brooklyn Dodgers around the same time that Jackie Robinson was on the team. And he was a really good player back in the day. And he'll sign through the mail, of course, for donation, but he'll also send you a letter back saying how he's using that donation. Interesting.
It's kind of like Bart started with the Rawhide Foundation.
Yeah. And I think the Carl's or Mr. Erskine, because I keep saying that I need to send it before, he's good age. I think he's in his 80s or close to 90s, and I need to send one out to him because his charity has to do with like Special Olympics. And that one's always close to my heart because I've known people with disabilities, and I've got a couple cousins that, I got a cousin that has Down syndrome and autism, and then I've got another cousin with autism. So I like that charity, and I keep saying I need to send something, but my procrastination sets in.
So would your two favorite actors ones, because you said you had two favorite actors, would one be Adam West on that one?
He is actually not my top one. He's in the running for it, but he's not the top one. My top one is the Batman for our generation. He has been the only voice of Batman since '92, and that's Kevin Conroy. He did the voice of Batman for Batman the Animated Series, the Justice League cartoons, and all that since 1992.
That's very cool.
Yeah, he was, he's, like I said, he's the Batman for my generation. And then the other one, this also goes into my nerdum. I'm also a big, well, not big, I won't say I'm huge into it, but I love musicals. And one of my favorite musicals is from 1974 or 5, and it's the movie 1776. And there's a gentleman in the movie that had went on to a long acting career, and most people would know him now more for playing on Boy Meets World as Mr. Feeney.
Oh, nice.
William Daniels, and that's what I know him more from is playing Mr. Feeney.
Yeah.
But I also love the movie 1776, so that's what I sent, was a picture of him in the movie.
Very cool.
So those are my top two actors. Now I've gotten lots of other stuff back. Baseball-wise, I've gotten stuff back. Football-wise, let's just say I'm an autograph collector, so I'm not a team-specific person when it comes to my through the mail. Now, when it comes to in-person, I'm pretty good about the only in-person stuff that I get are basically Packers.
Mm-hmm.
I've went to the team hotels, during game weeks for the visiting teams, and I've gotten some pretty cool ones through there. But in-person wise, I'm strictly Packers. But through the mail, I'm anybody.
There's nothing wrong with that. It's always cool to have a wide variety of collections and that.
Yeah, but if a lot of fans would see some of the ones that I got, I probably would be disowned. Because I have, let's just say, a wide color variety.
Sure.
I have to say one of my best ones that I got, and I on the website we have people who post stuff about doing projects where they try to get a certain, like I know a guy who's trying to get the whole 1985 Bears team. You know, that's the only year they won a Super Bowl.
Right.
So he's a Bears fan, and he's been trying since, I don't know, like the mid-90s to get the whole team. So I came up with my own project, and I was going to try getting every head coach of that year. And I got probably half of them, but my best one, and I hate to say it, and it really, I feel the bile building in the back of my throat when I go to say it, but my best one was actually Jason Garrett of the Dallas Cowboys. And the reason why is because I sent the 2 pictures, and when I got the return envelope back, it was almost a half-inch thick. And I was like, there's no way there's just 2 pictures in there, because a picture isn't even like a millimeter thick. And when I opened it, he had signed both my pictures. He had sent 3 team photos, 5 pocket schedules, and then that was the year they had drafted Ezekiel Elliott. And he sent me that, you know how they have the different district Sports Illustrated. So Mike Daniels was on like the upper Midwest and all that. Well, they had Ezekiel Elliott for the Cowboys district, and he sent me that copy of that Sports Illustrated.
That's crazy.
So, I mean, it was just amazing at the stuff that I got through it. On top of the 2 pictures he basically sent me a fan pack on top of the 2 pictures I sent for him to sign.
That's a cool thing, though. I mean, that's a cool touch of really going above and beyond, and a team that you might not care for, you at least like that person a little bit more after it's all said and done.
Yeah, I'd probably like him more once he's out of the Cowboys, but yeah.
Did you ever get Bill Belichick's back?
Yes. Bill Belichick is actually an amazing guy to get through the mail. He's another one that I'll add a personal touch, well, a semi-personal touch. Like I said, when I send my stuff out, I always send an SASE with it, a self-addressed stamped envelope. Otherwise, you're not going to get your stuff back.
Yep.
And so I sent out to him, and when I got it back, it was in a completely different envelope that he paid postage on, that had the Patriots, and I still have the envelope. It's got a Patriots logo on it. And then inside, I always try to send 2. I don't know why. I'm greedy like that. I always try sending 2 photos. He had kept one and signed the other one in silver, and it's a nice picture of him holding one of his mini Lombardi trophies. And he signed it in silver, to Joe, Brian, or Bill Belichick. But he also sent a typed letter saying, thanks for the support, and blah, 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 and then he signed the letter too.
That's really cool.
Thought process, because then they have to come up with a letter to write to this person to get stuff. One of your other podcast episodes I was just listening to was the guy that, and like I said, I'm not good with names, that had used his typewriter class to send a letter to the Packers to get the Brett Favre stuff.
Yeah, I think that was that Andrew? I think that was Andrew.
I think so, but like I said, I'm not good with names.
Yeah.
But, that that just helps, interaction. If you can't get to Green Bay to do the training camps, that would be the next step to do. That would allow some interaction. I've had, I'm also, being from Iowa, I'm a big Hawkeyes fan. I know I get ostracized when I'm in Wisconsin for it, but there were a couple of players that were undrafted free agents that were big-time Iowa stars but signed as undrafted. And I had went to a game one year that they had played while they were still at Iowa, and I took some pictures. And I went through and hand-wrote my letter and sent it out, and, I don't know. I think the shortest time I've ever had was like 9 days for a return. But like a couple weeks later, I get it back, and they had wrote back, hey, great camera work, love the pictures, and then they signed the little note on top of signing the pictures.
That's cool.
So, sometimes you get players that send little extra touches with it.
Yep.
So, it helps with more player-fan interaction.
Yeah. Yeah, they definitely appreciate it. That's for sure. Especially some of those younger guys that maybe don't get a lot of the attention that other ones do.
One that shocked me that I got back through the mail was, and this one really shocked me because I sent it out after the draft. I want to say it was 2 years ago. You'll have to correct me if I'm wrong as soon as I say the name, but he ended up being the number 1 pick overall, and that's Jared Goff.
Yep.
And that one surprised me because I had sent it just after the draft, and it's what are the Packers known for? Hail Marys. That's one of my Hail Marys that I threw up like, okay, well, I'm either going to get it back or I'm not. If I don't, it just costs me the postage. If I do, that's going to be a great one for my collection. I ended up getting it back a year later.
Wow. That's really cool, though. Not too often you hear that where you get it back and it, especially after a year.
Oh, the longest one I ever got back, and again, a lot of people are going to hate me for saying this team name, but Chad Greenway of the Minnesota Vikings. I had sent to him his rookie year, and I could tell that I had sent to him his rookie year because it was a really crappy. No, it wasn't his rookie year. It was 3 years after his rookie year, but it was a really crappy edit that I had made. I'm not the best photo editor, and I had cut out his picture and pasted him against the purple and gold background, and it's really crappy. And I sent it to him because I was just getting into it, and I was worried about all the copyright issues if I went to the store and printed them off. So that was my way of cutting copyright. Don't tell anybody. But I had sent to him, and I got that back. He retired 2 years ago.
Something
I got that back the year he retired. So almost 8 years.
You damn near forgot about it at that point.
Oh, I did.
So I feel like you and I could probably talk another 3 hours.
Oh, God. We could probably talk another 3 days.
Probably. But we'll work on wrapping this one up here. So I always end each podcast by asking.
I've been ready for this. I've been ready for this one.
Yeah?
I've been listening to your podcast. Yeah. Turn on the Rocky music. I'm set.
All right. My questions change midway through on my podcast, FYI. I don't know how far you've gotten.
I don't know either, but I'm set with whatever you got. Let's go.
All right. So first one I'm going to ask, if you could meet and have a conversation with any person associated with the Packers, alive or dead, excluding Vince Lombardi, who are you choosing?
All right. I'm going to give you a modern. I'm going to cheat. I'm going to give you a modern one, and I'm going to give you an old-time one.
Okay.
The modern one would be Aaron Rodgers, because I think me and him have the same type of humor, where it's that kind of dry humor that, I've seen him goof around with players in practice where he's always, poking and prodding at guys just to get them going. And I think we share a lot of the same personality, so it'd be just amazing to sit down and have that little back and forth with him for an hour. But my old-time one, because I've been thinking about this one for a while, And originally I had thought Curly Lambeau, because I wanted to, who better than the person who started the whole thing.
Right.
But then I got to thinking, and I looked up the guy's name, and I can't pronounce his last name because it's one of those typical Wisconsin last names that uses vowels and letters and consonants in wrong places. But he was the president of the Packers in 1959 when they hired Vince Lombardi.
Oh, Olenikchuk?
Yeah, whatever.
Olenikchuk.
And the reason is I would love to know the thought process behind bringing in Vince. Because, at that time, he really wasn't a huge name quantity.
Mm-hmm.
He was just an offensive coach for the Giants.
Well, and the rumor was they were going to bring in Curly Lambeau again.
Yeah.
And they picked Vince Lombardi.
And, at that point, he was, like I said, he was just an offensive coach for the Giants, and you really don't hear much prior to 1959 about him. I mean, there could have been, but nothing that really sticks out in history.
Mm-hmm.
So I would just love to know what his thought process is of bringing in this guy, why he did it, what made him, they had to go through an interview process. So you would just love to know what in that interview really said, hey, this is our coach. This is the guy that's going to bring us back to prominence.
That's a good answer. I like that one. You're going outside the box there.
Oh, I told you. I'm ready for you, man.
Next one here. If you could take any Packer player from a past team in their prime and add them to the team now, excluding Reggie White, who are you taking?
That one I haven't heard, but that one's a pretty good one, and it kind of goes in with what I was thinking about for a different question I thought you were going to ask. Don Hudson. I don't know if he would have the same success now as he would have back then.
Sure.
But the stats that he was putting up at that point in the history of the NFL, when's the last time you knew of a wide receiver that won MVP?
Right.
And
doesn't happen often.
No. And I got to looking this up because I thought you were going to ask me about, and this could be the next question, but I thought you were going to ask me about what game I would love to go to.
Yeah, that was going to be my next one.
Okay, well then I'm going to jump ahead and throw this on top of it. 1945, Lions, Packers. I think it's still an NFL record. He scored, was it 3 or 4? 4 touchdowns in one quarter.
Wow.
On top of also kicking 5 extra points.
What a machine.
And not only that, but 1945, let's see, he was the original Favre. And the reason I call him the original Favre was because I got to reading about him. I'm kind of like you where I love reading books and historical facts and stuff like that. And he, in 1944, he retired because he had some kind of chest injury. But then he came back. In 1945, he retired, but then he came back. And then I think he did it again in 1946.
Classic.
And so that game would be the one that I would go to. I think it was the Lions versus the Packers. And like I said, it was like 29-0 is what the final score was. But he had scored all those touchdowns in one quarter. And that's still a record that's unbroken.
That's awesome.
I believe, according to the article that I read.
That's a good answer there. Next one here. If you could watch any game again for the first time, having the same reactions again, excluding a championship game, which would you choose?
Excluding a championship game. Well, I know the most common answer that I've heard so far was the Oakland game, where Favre came out after his dad died.
Yep.
Which is a good one. Don't get me wrong. That's a great one. But there's two that come to mind because if I have to ride that emotional roller coaster again, one or both of them are more recent ones. One would have to be the Hail Mary in Detroit, and then the other one just happened week 1 of this year. That was such a boss moment for Rodgers to be gone, and everybody, you could hear the silence in the crowd, and and then for him to come out from the tunnel and just lead this epic comeback.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's typical Rodgers in that moment. I mean, you never can count him out when he's the quarterback.
Now, don't get me wrong. We've had a lot of great games over the years.
Yep.
If you want to go emotional roller coasters that leads to a positive, I mean, we've had lots of emotional roller coasters. Favre led us on all kinds of emotional roller coasters.
Mm-hmm.
But that one, Rodgers has him topped in that aspect, where with Favre it's 50-50. It's either going to be a win or a loss.
Yep.
Because he's either going to throw that winning touchdown or he's going to throw that losing interception.
Yep.
Rodgers so far has been so clutch that you kind of look forward, even though you hate seeing it, you kind of look forward to what kind of magic he's going to throw up there now.
Yeah, it's funny because I was at that 49ers game on Monday, and there's like, a minute left? You're on your own 10, and you're just still like, okay, that's way too much time for Rodgers. I think it's just going to happen. And then
that boss moment at the end of that drive where you can actually, because I got to watch the whole game, where there's like 6 seconds left on the clock, and he's looking over at Mike with one finger, like, one more. Just give me one more. It kind of gives you back to that, and completely different circumstances, but the movie Rookie of the Year, where Gary Busey just threw out his arm in the championship game, and he's begging and pleading with the manager, just give him one more throw. And Rodgers is doing the same thing, like, just give me one more shot.
One more.
He almost had it. He almost had it to Devontae on the top there, but he just kind of, I don't remember who the corner was covering Devontae, but he had him pretty well blanketed, and it was a little overthrown, but at least we were in field goal range.
Yeah, I think Rodgers' main thing was just to try to kill that clock down 3 more seconds.
Yeah.
But
and you never know, because the week before, Mason had that epic failure of a game. So you never knew what was going to happen. He had made a couple during the game already, but you never knew what was going to happen with that last one.
I'm always having faith in Mason.
Mason has always had a case of the yips.
Yep.
Where in a game, if he's missed 1 or 2, we're going to have problems with it.
Mm-hmm.
But then the next week, he can come back and nail 7 of them and never even bat an eye.
Yep, exactly. Good answer on that one. Final one here for you. This one stumps a lot of people. All right, I'm ready. If you became president of the Packers today, essentially having full ownership rights, what's the first thing you do as the quote-unquote owner?
Yeah, I could see where that would stump a lot of people. Because we've never had that situation before.
Yeah.
We've all been in that, publicly owned thing, and I don't think you could do any more than what we're doing right now.
There's got to be something you'd change, though, Joe. Something that you do.
What I would do? Are we talking? I'm going to ask this first before I give you the answer. Are we talking that we're still playing not playing, but still running like? I've taken over Mark Murphy's job, and we still have like the board of directors and all that stuff.
Yeah, essentially you have like an ownership right. Essentially the Mark Murphy. I was going to say if you became owner of the Packers, but obviously as the way they're structured, basically you have full authority to do whatever you want on the team.
I I think I would, and I know it would be hard to do, so I would have to, of course, hire me a couple of guys to do a lot more thinking on it than what I can produce. But I think I would, and this is me saying it while I'm staring at my own, make the stock a little bit more meaningful. And by that, I mean, right now it's amazing we can call ourselves owner, and, you get a little bit of a percentage off whatever through the pro shop online, or you get your own specific. But look how many times you say, oh yeah, well, I'm an NFL owner, and all these people are like, yeah, well, what's that do you?
Yep.
I would find a way to make that a little bit more meaningful. Maybe not to the point where how stock actually works, where you can pull dividends off of it. But I would figure a way to make it so you can. I know they give you a little bit more say already, because they give you a list of people to vote for, and you can vote who's the next person on the board.
Mm-hmm.
But somehow I would make it a little bit more meaningful to where you could do a little bit more, whether they give, I don't know, and this would be hard to do, how hard it is to get on the season ticket line, or how hard it is to get tickets. Maybe give you a discount for a game. One game a year, one or two games a year, we give this many people a discount to a game.
Or even just doing a random drawing for the opportunity to get season tickets.
Yeah.
I mean, do a lottery.
I know I kind of circumvented your deal by not giving you a direct answer, but I would have to do more with the stock option.
That's good. I like that. Well, we've been talking for quite some time here. I don't know. I might edit it down a little bit or trim up some of the stuff a little bit. Anything?
Well, I didn't even get through all my stories, so we'll have to do this again, too.
There you go. Anything you'd like to add that you've, feel that we didn't get to this round? We can always do another round, too.
Yeah, I would love to sit down and talk to you more. I love this stuff. I've even thought about doing my own little YouTube or podcast thing, but it's my procrastination side.
Well, I think you should.
I gotta live through other people.
I definitely think you should, man. It's a lot of fun. You get to talk to a lot of people and do a lot of cool things. So I appreciate you taking the time to be on the episode.
Well, I thank you for having me.
Absolutely. How we always end each and every podcast, go Pack Go.
That's all you can do is say go Pack Go.
And that will do it for this episode of the Green Bay Narrative. I want to say thank you once again to each and every one of you for listening to the episode. I also want to say a huge thank you to Joe for taking the time to sit down, tell his stories, have a conversation with me. So great to talk to him during the season. Normally we only talk during training camp, or briefly on Twitter periodically. So it was good to sit down and talk to him during the season. Next week, I am joined by Paul, which will be another fun episode. I'm excited for you to hear that one. Be sure to follow me on any of my social medias, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, The Green Bay Guy, or you can add me on Snapchat, The GB Guy. Until next week, go Pack Go.